The bridge of the alien ship was filled with flashing red lights. Captain Vren held tight to his chair as another explosion shook the entire vessel. Sparks flew from the control panels around him. His crew worked hard to keep the ship running, but everyone knew they were losing this fight. The Kelmar people were peaceful explorers. They traveled through space to learn about new worlds and meet other species. They had never expected to run into the Krathon Empire. The Krathons were different. They were warriors who conquered everyone they met. They took what they wanted and destroyed anyone who got in their way. Vren's ship, the Kelmar's Hope, had accidentally crossed into space that the Krathons claimed as their own. It did not matter that the Kelmar meant no harm. It did not matter that they were just passing through. The Krathons saw them as intruders, and now they were paying the price. "Captain, we have holes in the ship on decks 4 through 7, his officer said. Her voice shook with fear. 2 of our engines are destroyed. We are running out of air. Vren looked at the screen in front of him. It showed the Krathon warships all around them. There were 5 enemy vessels, each one bigger and stronger than his small exploration ship. They circled like sharks around wounded prey. The Kelmar's Hope did not stand a chance. "Send out a distress call," Vren ordered. "Use every frequency we have. Ask for help from anyone who can hear us." His communications officer turned to look at him. "Sir, the nearest Kelmar base is 3 weeks away. Even if they leave right now, they cannot reach us in time. The Galactic Council forces are even farther." "I know," Vren said quietly, "but we have to try. My crew deserves that much. Send the message." The officer nodded and began typing on her console. Within seconds, the distress call went out into space. It carried their location, their situation, and a desperate plea for help. The message traveled at the speed of light, spreading out in all directions like ripples in a pond. Around them, the Krathon ships moved closer. They were preparing for the final attack. Vren knew that within minutes his ship and everyone on it would be destroyed. He had failed his crew. He had failed his people. The message traveled through the darkness of space, passing by empty star systems and distant planets. Most species who might receive it were too far away to help. The few who were close enough would not risk angering the Krathon Empire. Everyone knew that the Krathons did not forgive and did not forget. But the message reached one place that no one in the galaxy expected. It reached a fleet that had been waiting in silence for 50 years. It reached Earth ships. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison sat at his station on the bridge of the carrier Phoenix Dawn. He was monitoring the usual communications when something new appeared on his screen. He read it once, then read it again to make sure he understood correctly. "Captain Hayes, you need to see this right now," he called out. Captain Lisa Hayes walked quickly across the bridge. She was a tall woman with gray eyes that missed nothing. She had commanded ships for 15 years and had never lost a crew member. She read the message on Morrison's screen and felt her jaw tighten. It was a distress call. Civilians under attack. They were dying, and they needed help immediately. "How far away are they?" Hayes asked. 47 minutes if we push the engines to maximum," Morrison answered. "But Captain, those coordinates are in space the Krathons claim as their territory. If we go there, we might start a war." Hayes thought about this for exactly 3 seconds. Then she made her decision. "Get me Admiral Chen on a secure channel," she ordered, "and prepare the entire fleet for combat. Do it quietly." Within 2 minutes, Admiral Catherine Chen appeared on the screen. The Admiral was the commander of Earth's 3rd Fleet. She had gray hair and a face that showed years of military service. She listened as Hayes explained the situation. "The Galactic Council has a policy about the Krathons," Admiral Chen said carefully. "They do not interfere in Krathon space." "Yes, ma'am," Hayes replied. "But we are not part of the Galactic Council." A small smile appeared on Admiral Chen's face. "That is correct, Captain. You have the authority to respond to distress calls however you think is best. If you happen to meet hostile forces, you can defend yourself and any ships you are protecting." "Understood." "Admiral and Captain," Admiral Chen added, "show them what humanity can do." The communication ended. Hayes turned to face her bridge crew. Every person was watching her, waiting for orders. They all knew what was coming. Humanity had been building and training for 50 years. They had prepared for this moment. Now it was time to act. "All ships go to battle stations," Hayes commanded. "Set course for those coordinates." "Maximum speed. And someone wake up Colonel Peters. His Marines will want to be part of this." The Phoenix Dawn's engines came to life with a deep rumble that could be felt throughout the ship. One by one, the other ships in the fleet followed. 7 massive carriers, 23 destroyers, and 41 frigates began to accelerate. They moved as one, their formation perfect. Earth's deadliest fleet was going to answer the distress call. They were going to war. The Krathons had spent a century conquering weaker species. They had destroyed entire civilizations. They had never met an enemy who could truly fight back. They thought they were the strongest force in the galaxy. They were about to learn they were wrong. As the human fleet raced through space, the crew members prepared themselves. Weapons were checked and double-checked. Pilots climbed into their fighters. Marines put on their armor and loaded their guns. Medical teams set up their equipment, ready for whatever might come. On the bridge, Hayes watched the countdown timer. 45 minutes until they arrived. 45 minutes until the Krathons discovered that Earth existed. 45 minutes until everything changed. She thought about the message they had received. A desperate call from people who thought no one would come. People who were about to die because they had accidentally crossed an invisible line in space. It reminded her of Earth's own history, of all the times when help did not arrive in time. But this time would be different. This time someone was coming. This time, the victims would not die alone and forgotten. Hayes picked up the ship-wide communicator. Her voice went to every deck, every room, every person on the Phoenix Dawn and throughout the fleet. This is Captain Hayes. In 44 minutes, we will arrive at the location of a civilian ship under attack. The attackers are from the Krathon Empire, a military power that has terrorized this region of space for 100 years. They think they can destroy whoever they want without consequences. Today, we are going to teach them otherwise. We are going to show them that Earth does not stand by while innocent people are murdered. We are going to show them what happens when they mess with the wrong species. Prepare yourselves. We are going into battle. Throughout the fleet, thousands of men and women heard those words. They felt no fear. They had trained their entire lives for this. They were ready. The human fleet continued its race through the darkness. Behind them, Earth waited to hear what would happen. Ahead of them, the Kelmar's hope was dying. And somewhere in between, history was about to be made. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity had arrived and nothing would ever be the same again. War Chief Thrak stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the Kelmar vessel die slowly. He felt satisfaction as his weapons tore pieces off the small exploration ship. The Kelmar were weak. They had no business being in space that belonged to the Krathon Empire. His crew had already started betting on which weapon shot would destroy the Kelmar ship completely. It was a game they played often. Thrak enjoyed watching his warriors have fun. After 40 years in the Krathon military, he had seen hundreds of battles. This was just another easy victory to add to his record. "Commander, we are detecting something strange," his sensor operator said suddenly. "Multiple ships are appearing. They are 200,000 kilometers away and getting closer very fast." Thrak felt his good mood disappear. "Are they Kelmar reinforcements?" "No, sir. These ships do not match any design in our database. We have never seen anything like them before. That was unusual." In his 40 years of service, Thrak had encountered every major species in this part of space. He knew their ships, their weapons, their tactics. Unknown ships arriving at the exact moment of a distress call was too much of a coincidence. "Show me on the main screen," Thrak commanded. The view screen changed to display the incoming vessels. Thrak felt cold fear run through his body for the first time in years. The ships were sleek and dangerous looking. Their hulls were dark gray and covered with weapons. They moved together with perfect coordination. In the center of the formation, 7 enormous carriers made even his heavy cruiser look small. "Send them a message," Thrak ordered, trying to keep his voice steady. "And move our fleet into defensive positions." On the bridge of the Phoenix Dawn, Captain Hayes watched the Krathon ships scramble to respond. She had studied everything Earth knew about Krathon military tactics. They were aggressive and powerful. They usually won by having bigger guns and more ships than their enemies. But they had never fought humans before. "Incoming transmission, Captain," Morrison reported. "Audio only." "The translation program is working on it now." The harsh sounds of the Krathon language filled the bridge. Then the computer translated the words into English. "Unknown vessels, you have entered Krathon space. Identify yourselves immediately or be destroyed." Hayes allowed herself a small, cold smile. "Open a channel on all frequencies." She waited until Morrison nodded to show the channel was open. Then she spoke in a clear, calm voice. Crathan Forces, this is Captain Lisa Hayes of the Earth Defense Force carrier Phoenix Dawn. We are responding to a distress call from the vessel you are attacking. You will stop firing immediately and leave this area. There was a long pause. Then the Crathon commander's voice came back, full of contempt. Earth? We have no record of this species. You are violating Crathon territory. Your fleet will surrender now and prepare to be boarded, or you will be eliminated. Hayes looked at her tactical officer, Lieutenant Ben Carter. What do you think of their ships? 4 heavy cruisers and 12 destroyers, Carter reported. They have about the same total mass as our fleet, but their weapons are old technology. Their shields use a simple rotating frequency. I can break through them with 3 shots. Good. Hayes turned her attention back to the view screen. Crathon Commander, this is your final warning. Stop firing and leave, or we will open fire. The Crathon Commander laughed. The sound was ugly and mean. You dare threaten the Crathon Empire? Your arrogance will be your death, humans. All ships, destroy them. The Crathon fleet opened fire. Missiles and energy beams shot across space toward the human formation. On the Phoenix Dawn, alarms started ringing as the sensors detected all the incoming weapons. Hayes remained perfectly calm. All ships, evasive pattern Delta. Return fire when ready. Target their heavy cruisers first. What happened next would be studied in military schools across the galaxy for many years. The human fleet moved like a school of fish. Each ship adjusted its position in perfect sync with all the others. The Crathon weapons had been designed to destroy targets that stayed in one place. They found only empty space where the human ships had been just moments before. Then humanity fired back. Human railguns were the result of centuries of warfare and decades of advanced research. They shot pieces of super-hard metal at incredible speeds. Each shot carried enough energy to destroy a mountain. When they hit the Crathon shields, the old technology did not have a chance. War Chief Thrak watched in horror as his flagship's shields failed after the first 3 shots. Exactly as the human had predicted. The second round of shots tore through his armor like it was paper. The third round went completely through his ship, causing explosions and system failures everywhere. All ships retreat. Thrak screamed into his communicator. Get us out of here now, but it was too late. The human destroyers had moved to block their escape routes. They worked together with perfect timing. One by one, the Crathon vessels found themselves being shot at by multiple human ships. Their hulls were torn apart by weapons that moved too fast to see and hit too hard to survive. 8 minutes after the battle started, 12 Crathon vessels were floating wrecks. The remaining 4 ships, including Thrak's damaged flagship, were signaling that they surrendered. On the Kelmar's Hope, Captain Vren stared at his view screen in complete shock. He could not believe what he had just witnessed. The human fleet had appeared from nowhere and destroyed a Crathon attack force in less time than it took to run a basic ship diagnostic. His crew sat in stunned silence around him. Sir, we are receiving a message, his communications officer said quietly. It is from the humans. Vren straightened his uniform and tried to look composed. Put them through. Captain Hayes' face appeared on his screen. She looked professional and calm. Somehow that calmness was more frightening than if she had looked angry or excited. Kelmar vessel, this is Captain Hayes. Our medical teams are ready to help with your wounded. We will also send engineers to help repair your systems. I thank you, Captain, Vren managed to say. We owe you our lives. But may I ask, who are you? Where did you come from? Hayes smiled, and for the first time, Vren saw warmth in her expression. We are from Earth, Captain, and we heard you needed help. Several hours later, human engineers were working on the Kelmar's Hope, while medical teams treated the wounded. Captain Vren and his officers were invited aboard the Phoenix Dawn for a meeting. The conference room was designed to hold different types of aliens, but the Kelmar still looked nervous. They sat across from Captain Hayes and her command staff. I must confess something, Vren said carefully. We had never heard of Earth before today. Your species is not registered with the Galactic Council. Lieutenant Commander Morrison brought up a holographic display showing Earth and the nearby star systems. That is because we kept ourselves hidden on purpose. 50 years ago, we detected radio signals from the galactic community. We made a decision then. Before we announced ourselves to everyone, we wanted to understand the political situation. And what did you learn? Asked Shira, Vren's chief engineer. Hayes leaned forward, her expression serious. We learned that the galaxy is divided into many factions. The Crathon Empire keeps expanding and conquering other species. The Galactic Council either cannot or will not stop them. We found species being enslaved while the major powers did nothing. We decided we needed to be ready before we introduced ourselves. So you built a fleet, Vren said quietly. In secret. Several fleets, Morrison corrected. The third fleet that you see here is just one of 7. We have forces positioned throughout this entire sector of space. Shira's translator showed her shock. 7 fleets? That would require enormous industrial capacity. How did you accomplish this without being detected? Colonel Jack Peters, the commander of the fleet's Marines, spoke up. Humans are very good at 2 things. Building things and keeping secrets. We have had a lot of practice at both. Vren absorbed all this information. His mind was racing. The Krathons will not forgive this defeat. They will send more ships, bigger ships. You have made a dangerous enemy today. We know, Hayes said calmly. In fact, we are counting on it. The Krathon Empire has spent 100 years bullying everyone, because no one was willing to fight back. That changes starting now. You plan to fight them? Vren's voice rose slightly. Captain Hayes, with all respect, your ships are very powerful. But the Krathon Empire has thousands of vessels. Even 7 fleets cannot win against such numbers. Hayes looked at her officers, then back at Vren. Captain Vren, how much do you know about Earth's history? Very little, Vren admitted. Our quick scans of your databases suggest a violent past, but we do not know the details. Morrison pulled up another display showing Earth's timeline. It showed wars. Thousands of them. Conflicts that had destroyed entire continents. Weapons that could destroy cities in seconds. And through it all, humanity had survived and learned. For most of our history, Morrison explained, humans fought each other. We became experts at warfare. We made it into a science. Every military strategy, every tactical method, every innovation was tested in real combat. Then 50 years ago, we stopped fighting each other and focused all that knowledge outward. We built a fleet using every lesson we learned. Hayes continued. Our weapons are designed by people who survived real wars. Our tactics come from thousands of actual battles. 3 days after the battle, Supreme War Chief Drakthar sat in the war chamber on the Krathon homeworld. He listened to the reports with growing fury. His scales rippled with barely contained rage. An entire task force had been destroyed. 4 ships were captured, and the enemy was an unknown species that claimed to be answering a distress call. These humans, Drakthar growled. What do we know about them? His intelligence officer, a scarred veteran named Mokhtar, brought up what little information they had gathered. Very little, Supreme War Chief. They appeared suddenly. They have superior weapons technology. They showed tactical coordination beyond anything we have seen before. Our captured crews report that the humans treated their wounds and released them with a message. What message? Drakthar demanded. That the Krathon Empire's expansion ends now. That if we attack another civilian vessel, they will respond with overwhelming force. The war chamber erupted with angry roars. Every warrior present was insulted by such arrogance. Drakthar silenced them with a gesture of his clawed hand. They think they can threaten the Empire, Drakthar said. Send the 5th Armada. Crush them completely. Make an example that will be remembered across the galaxy. Mokhtar hesitated. He had survived 40 years of combat by knowing when to be cautious. Supreme War Chief, our analysis suggests we should be careful. If the humans could defeat our task force so easily, perhaps we should gather more intelligence before committing a full armada. Coward, Drakthar bellowed. His voice echoed off the stone walls. The Krathon Empire does not show fear. We do not negotiate with inferior species. Send the 5th Armada immediately. I want these humans erased from existence. The orders went out across the Krathon Empire. Hundreds of ships began mobilizing for a war of total destruction. Officers called their crews back from leave. Weapons were loaded and systems were checked. Within hours, the 5th Armada was preparing to launch. Mokhtar watched all this happen with a growing sense of unease. The humans had not acted like victims or prey. They had acted like hunters who had just found new territory. He hoped, for the Empire's sake, that Supreme War Chief Drakthar knew what he was doing. Aboard the Phoenix Dawn, Captain Hayes received word of the Krathon mobilization with no surprise whatsoever. She had expected exactly this response, had in fact planned for it. Morrison sent a message to Admiral Chen, tell her the Krathons took the bait. Request additional fleet support for Phase 2 of the operation. Already done, Captain, Morrison replied with a slight smile. The Admiral sends her regards. She says the 1st, 2nd, and 4th fleets are moving into position. She also says, and I am quoting directly, "Time to show these people why you do not mess with Earth." Hayes allowed herself a genuine smile. The Krathons thought they were hunting humanity. They had no idea they were walking straight into the most elaborate trap humans had ever built. The real war was about to begin. The 5th Armada of the Krathon Empire was designed to inspire terror across the galaxy. 300 warships moved through space in perfect formation. There were small, fast frigates and massive, powerful dreadnoughts. Each ship was crewed by warriors who had never known defeat. They had brought entire civilizations to their knees. Now they were coming for Earth. Fleet Commander Vraka stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Bloodied Honor. He reviewed tactical displays with satisfaction. Intelligence reported that the human fleet had stayed near the site of their first battle. They were apparently defending the Kelmar vessel while it was being repaired. This seemed foolish to Vraka. The humans had revealed their capabilities before understanding what they faced. "All ships maintain battle formation," Vraka commanded. "When we reach weapons range, the dreadnoughts will focus their fire on the enemy carriers. Once those are destroyed, the smaller vessels will be easy targets." His second-in-command, a warrior named Thex, studied the tactical display. "Commander, the humans must know we are coming. Their sensors would have detected us hours ago, yet they have not retreated." "Because they are arrogant," Vraka replied. "They won one battle against an unprepared task force and now think themselves invincible. We will teach them the price of such foolishness." What Vraka did not know was that ahead of him, on the bridge of the Phoenix Dawn, every word of his conversation was being monitored. Humanity's electronic warfare capabilities were far beyond anything the Krathons possessed. Their communications were completely open to human listening devices. "They are maintaining their approach vector," reported Lieutenant Sarah Park from the Signals Intelligence Station. "No signs they have detected our other fleets." Captain Hayes studied the three-dimensional tactical display floating above her command table. The Krathon 5th Armada was shown as red icons, moving steadily toward the blue icons of 3rd Fleet. But scattered throughout the surrounding space, invisible to Krathon sensors, were green icons representing human ships. "There were many, many green icons. Range to the Krathons?" Hayes asked. 90 minutes at their current speed," Lieutenant Carter replied. "They will reach engagement range in 72 minutes. Hayes nodded slowly. "All ships maintain positions. Let them think we are sitting targets." Across the fleet, captains prepared their crews for combat. The human vessels appeared to drift lazily in space. They were clustered around the Kelmar's Hope as if standing guard. Only their advanced sensor arrays, far more sophisticated than they appeared, tracked every movement of the approaching Krathon force. The minutes ticked by slowly. Tension built on every human ship. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone knew their role. They had practiced this scenario 100 times in simulations. Now it was real. 1 hour later, Fleet Commander Vraka prepared to give the order to attack. His ships had reached optimal firing range. Weapons were charged and targeting solutions were calculated. The human fleet remained stationary, apparently unaware of their approaching doom. "All vessels, open fire!" Vraka commanded with confidence. 300 Krathon ships unleashed their weapons at the same moment. Missiles streaked across space. Energy beams cut through the darkness. Kinetic projectiles accelerated toward their targets. It was a wall of destruction racing toward the human fleet. Then Captain Hayes spoke one single word into her communicator. Now, space itself seemed to tear open. Hundreds of human warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly around the Krathon Armada. They had been waiting in precisely calculated positions powered down to avoid detection. The 1st, 2nd, and 4th fleets materialized in a sphere completely surrounding the Krathon force. Their weapons were already locked on target. On the Bloodied Honor, every alarm started screaming at once. Vraka stared at his tactical display in complete disbelief. It suddenly showed hundreds of new contacts. The humans had not been waiting to be attacked. They had been the bait in a trap of incredible complexity. "Evasive maneuvers," Vraka shouted. "All ships break formation and engage the enemy." But it was already far too late. The human fleets opened fire with devastating precision. Unlike the chaotic fury of the Krathon attack, human weapons fire was coordinated through advanced computer networks. Each ship knew exactly where every other ship was shooting. There was no wasted ammunition and no friendly fire incidents. The outer ring of Krathon vessels died first. They were caught in crossfire from multiple directions. Their shields were designed to block attacks from one direction. They could not handle synchronized strikes from 3 or 4 human ships at once. Railgun slugs punched through armor. Missile salvos overwhelmed point defenses. Directed energy weapons carved through hulls like knives through paper. "Report," Vrachis demanded, trying to understand the chaos around him. "We have lost 57 ships in the first 2 minutes," Thex replied. His voice was hollow with shock. "Casualties are mounting across all divisions. Commander, we need to retreat immediately." "The Fifth Armada does not retreat," Vrachis snarled, even as another explosion rocked his flagship. "All dreadnoughts focus fire on the human carriers. If we can destroy their command ships, their coordination will collapse." The Krathon dreadnoughts were massive vessels covered with heavy weapons. They turned their attention to the Phoenix Dawn and her sister carriers. They unleashed a barrage that would have vaporized any normal target. Captain Hayes watched the incoming fire on her displays without any fear. "Activate defensive screen. Deploy all countermeasures." What happened next seemed impossible to Krathon understanding. The human carriers were surrounded by escort vessels specifically designed for defense. Their point defense systems created an overlapping field of fire so dense that nothing could get through. Missiles were shot down before they got close. Energy beams were deflected by reactive armor that shifted and adapted in microseconds. Kinetic projectiles were intercepted by precisely aimed counterfire. "Their defenses are impenetrable," Thex reported. Desperation crept into his voice. "Commander, we are down to 212 ships. We are losing this battle badly." Vrachis refused to accept reality. The Krathon Empire had never lost a fleet engagement. Never in their entire history. "Signal all ships. Ramming speed. If we cannot destroy them with weapons, we will use our hulls as weapons." It was a desperate tactic born of pride and fury, rather than intelligent strategy. The Krathon ships. The human fleet stopped shooting immediately. It was another display of their superior coordination and discipline. Captain Hayes opened a communication channel to the Krathon flagship that was drifting damaged in space. "Fleet Commander Vrachis, this is Captain Hayes. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Your wounded will receive medical treatment. Your surviving crews will be returned to Krathon space with a message for your Supreme War Chief." Vrachis felt the weight of total defeat crushing down on him. His pride, his honor, everything he had built over decades of service was destroyed in less than 30 minutes. "What message?" he asked bitterly. Hayes's voice became hard as steel. "That the days of Krathon expansion are over. That for every species you have conquered, for every civilian ship you have attacked, there will be consequences. And that humanity will not stand aside while tyrants terrorize the innocent." In the war chamber on the Krathon homeworld, Supreme War Chief Drakthar received news of the Fifth Armada's destruction in stunned silence. 300 ships all gone, defeated by a species that no one had heard of just days ago. Around him, his advisors argued and shouted. Some called for total war against the humans. Others urged caution and diplomacy. But Drakthar heard none of their words. He was thinking about the message the humans had sent. He was facing an uncomfortable realization that was settling deep in his mind. The Krathon Empire had finally met a species more dangerous than themselves. The implications were staggering. For 100 years, the Krathons had expanded without serious opposition. They had conquered 24 different species. They had taken whatever resources they wanted. They had imposed their will across this entire sector of space. And now suddenly someone had said no. Someone had the power to back up that refusal. "We must respond," one of his generals insisted. "If we do nothing, we will look weak. Every species in the galaxy will see that the Empire can be defeated." "They already see it," Mokhtar said quietly. The intelligence officer had been standing in the corner, observing everything. "The news is spreading across every communication network. The humans made sure of that. They want everyone to know what happened here." Drakthar turned his attention to Mokhtar. "What do you recommend?" "Caution, Supreme War Chief. We need to understand these humans before we act. We need to know their full capabilities, their numbers, their goals. Rushing into another battle will only result in more losses." "So we do nothing," another general demanded. "We let them humiliate the Empire?" "We learn," Mokhtar replied. "We adapt. We prepare. The humans have shown us that our technology is outdated. Our tactics are predictable. Our strategy is flawed. If we do not change, we will lose everything. The argument continued for hours. But Drakthar had already made his decision. He ordered a halt to all military expansion. He ordered increased intelligence gathering on human capabilities. And he ordered the Military Research Division to begin developing countermeasures to human weapons. The Krathan Empire was not surrendering. But for the first time in living memory, it was being forced to pause and reconsider its approach. The galaxy was changing, and the Krathons needed to change with it or face extinction. 2 weeks after what historians would later call the Battle of Kelmar's Hope, representatives from 43 different species gathered at the Galactic Council's orbital station. The station hung in space above the neutral world of Harmony Prime. The council chamber was filled with beings of every imaginable shape and size. They were all united by one thing. They all wanted to meet the humans. The council itself consisted of representatives from the most powerful species in the galaxy. They sat in elevated positions around the circular chamber. Chancellor Mevris, an elegant being from the bird-like Stellari species, called the assembly to order with a gesture of her wing-like appendages. "We are gathered today to address unprecedented events," Mevris announced. Her voice was automatically translated into dozens of languages. "A new species has emerged. They call themselves humans from a world they name Earth. They have decisively defeated Krathon forces twice. They have requested admission to this council." Murmurs filled the chamber. The Krathon Empire was represented by Ambassador Rokath. He sat in stony silence. The mighty empire had been humbled in front of the entire galaxy, and everyone knew it. "I move that we reject this application," Rokath said. His translator barely contained his rage. "These humans are warmongers. They have shown nothing but violence since their arrival. They are a threat to galactic peace." Admiral Catherine Chen stood calmly. She was representing Earth in full-dress uniform. She had been chosen for this role very carefully. She was experienced, professional, and completely unintimidated by the gathered powers. "Ambassador Rokath, we responded to a distress call from civilians your forces were attacking," Chen said evenly. "We offered you the chance to withdraw peacefully. You chose violence twice. You massacred our warriors," Rokath shot back angrily. "We defended ourselves and others," Chen corrected him. "And we treated your wounded. We fed your prisoners. We returned them unharmed. How many species can say the Krathon Empire treated them with such mercy?" The chamber erupted as dozens of species tried to speak at once. Many of them had been victims of Krathon aggression. The pointed question struck a nerve with everyone present. Chancellor Mevris restored order by activating a sonic pulse that got everyone's attention. "Admiral Chen, your species' military capabilities are not in question. What concerns this council is your intentions. You built a massive fleet in secret. You engaged in military action without consulting established authorities. Why should we trust you?" Chen had prepared for exactly this question. "Chancellor, when Earth detected signals from the galactic community 50 years ago, we made a decision. Before announcing ourselves, we would observe and learn. What we saw troubled us deeply." She activated a holographic display showing a map of the galaxy. Red zones indicated Krathon-controlled space expanding steadily over the decades. Yellow zones marked regions of active conflict. Green zones, representing territory protected by the Galactic Council, were noticeably smaller than they should be. "We saw the Krathon Empire conquering species after species," Chen continued. "We saw the Galactic Council issue statements but take no real action. We saw dozens of smaller conflicts while the major powers looked away. And we remembered our own history." Another display appeared. It showed Earth's timeline of wars, genocides, and conflicts that had nearly destroyed humanity. But it also showed cooperation, rebuilding, and the eventual unification of the entire species under one government. "We know what it is like to live in chaos," Chen said quietly. "We know what it costs, so we prepared. We built a fleet not to conquer but to ensure we would never be helpless. And when we heard the Kelmar distress call, we realized something important." She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from dozens of different species. "We are not the only ones who need that protection. The galaxy is full of species who cannot defend themselves against predators like the Krathon Empire. The Council tries to help, but you are limited by politics and protocols that prevent effective action. Earth is not bound by those limitations. So you propose to be vigilantes?" challenged Ambassador Thel. representing the aquatic species known as the Collective. To enforce your own justice across the galaxy? No, Chen replied firmly. We propose to be defenders. We will respond to distress calls. We will protect civilian vessels. We will stand between tyrants and their victims, and we will do so within whatever framework this council establishes, as long as that framework actually protects innocent lives. Chancellor Mevris studied the human carefully. You say you will accept council authority, yet you acted without consulting us first. Because people were dying, Chen said bluntly. When the Kelmar ship sent that distress call, they had minutes to live, not days or weeks. Tell me, Chancellor, if the council had received that call, what would you have done? The silence that followed was damning. Everyone in the chamber knew the answer. The council would have debated. They would have formed committees. They would have discussed proper procedures. And by the time they decided to act, the Kelmar crew would have been dead. Captain Vren rose from his seat in the gallery where observers sat. May I address the council? Mevris nodded. The council recognizes Captain Vren of the Kelmar people. Honored delegates, Vren began. His voice was steady despite his obvious nervousness. My crew and I owe our lives to these humans. When our ship sent a distress call, we knew no one would arrive in time. The council was too far away and bound by procedures, but the humans came. They risked their lives for complete strangers. For a species they had never met before, they asked nothing in return except that we reach home safely. He paused and looked directly at Ambassador Rokath. The Krathon Empire has terrorized this region of space for a century. They have destroyed Kelmar ships before, and the council did nothing to stop them. The humans acted when no one else would. Whatever else they may be, they are not the villains in this situation. The chamber filled with discussion. Chen noticed several ambassadors nodding in agreement, particularly those from species who had suffered under Krathon aggression or other threats the council had failed to address effectively. Chancellor Mevris conferred quietly with the other council members for several minutes. The entire chamber waited in tense silence. Finally, she turned to address the assembly. The council has reached a decision. The application of Earth for council membership is approved, but with specific conditions. Surprised murmurs rippled through the chamber. Ambassador Rokath half rose from his seat in protest, then sat back down heavily. His expression showed pure rage, but he remained silent. Earth will be granted provisional membership, Mevris continued. Your military forces will be officially designated as a galactic peacekeeping fleet. You are authorized to respond to distress calls and protect civilian vessels throughout council space. However, any offensive military action must receive prior approval from the council. Additionally, Earth will share its defensive technologies with council members who request them. This will ensure that all species have the ability to protect themselves. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. It was not everything Earth had hoped for, but it was a solid beginning. The Earth delegation accepts these conditions. Chancellor. Furthermore, Mevris said, turning her attention to Ambassador Rokath, the Council formally condemns the Krathon Empire's unprovoked attack on the civilian vessel Kelmar's Hope. We issue a clear warning that any future attacks on civilian vessels will result in severe sanctions and possible military response from Council forces. Rokath stood abruptly. His scales rippled with barely contained anger. The Krathon Empire rejects this interference in our sovereignty. We will remember this day and this insult. As will we all, Mevris replied coolly. This session is now adjourned. The chamber slowly emptied as representatives filed out. Many stopped to speak with Admiral Chen, expressing support or asking questions about Earth. The galaxy had just changed in fundamental ways, and everyone wanted to understand what it meant for their own people. Later that evening, Captain Lisa Hayes hosted a small celebration aboard the Phoenix Dawn. The ship remained in orbit around Harmony Prime, waiting for new orders. Her senior officers gathered in the officers' mess, which had been decorated for the occasion. To the newest member of the Galactic Council, Hayes said, raising her glass in a toast. Her officers echoed the toast and drank. But Lieutenant Commander Morrison looked thoughtful rather than celebratory. Captain, do you really think the Krathons will back down? Hayes considered the question carefully. No, not completely. They will test us. They will push boundaries and try to find weaknesses in our defenses. But they will think twice before attacking civilian vessels or attempting to conquer weaker species. And every time they try something, we will be there to stop them. We cannot be everywhere at once, Colonel Peters pointed out reasonably. No, Hayes agreed. But we do not need to be. We just need to be fast enough that aggressors cannot predict where we will appear, and we need to be effective enough that the price of aggression becomes too high to pay. Deterrence, Morrison said with understanding. Like the nuclear weapons back on Earth during the Cold War period. Exactly right. We are not trying to fight a war of conquest across the galaxy. We are establishing a new balance of power where violence against civilians has real consequences, where the strong cannot simply prey on the weak with complete impunity. Hayes walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Kelmar's Hope was making its way home safely. Its crew was alive because humanity had answered their desperate call. It was a small thing, perhaps, in the grand scheme of galactic politics, but it mattered enormously to those people. We are writing a new chapter in galactic history, she said quietly. Not as conquerors or crusaders, but as guardians and protectors. Future generations will judge whether we made the right choices. We will get it right, Morrison said with confidence, because we learned from every mistake humanity ever made throughout our long history. We know the terrible cost of unchecked aggression. We understand the true value of peace, and we are not going to let this galaxy tear itself apart the way Earth nearly did. Hayes smiled at her crew. Then let us get back to work. There is an entire galaxy out there that needs to know humanity has finally arrived and is here to stay. 3 months passed. On the Krathon homeworld, Supreme War Chief Drakthar sat alone in his private chambers. He studied reports from across the Empire with growing unease. Human ships had been spotted in dozens of different systems. They were always near major trade routes or areas with heavy civilian traffic. They never attacked. They never threatened anyone. They just watched and patrolled. Somehow that made them even more unnerving. Even worse, 3 smaller species that the Krathon Empire had been quietly preparing to conquer had suddenly acquired defensive technologies. Their shields were stronger. Their weapons were more effective. Their detection systems were far superior to what they had possessed before. The technologies all bore the unmistakable signature of human design and engineering. The galaxy was changing rapidly, and the Krathon Empire was no longer the dominant predator. Drakthar had ordered a complete cessation of military expansion, at least for now. The Empire needed time to understand these humans better. They needed to find weaknesses in human tactics and technology. They needed to develop effective countermeasures. But even as Drakthar made his plans and studied his options, a small part of him wondered if perhaps the humans were actually right. The galaxy had always been full of warriors and conquerors, but Earth had produced something genuinely different. Not just soldiers, but true protectors. Not just weapons designed for attack, but shields meant for defense. It was a philosophy completely foreign to traditional Krathon thinking, but it was becoming impossible to ignore or dismiss. The humans had answered a simple distress call from complete strangers. That single action had changed the political fate of multiple empires, and the humans showed absolutely no signs of stopping or slowing down. Ambassador Thel of the Aquatic Collective requested a private meeting with Admiral Chen. They met in a secure conference room on Harmony Prime Station. The aquatic being floated in a specialized tank filled with water, while Chen sat comfortably in a human-style chair. Admiral, I wanted to speak with you away from the formal council setting, Thel began. My people have been watching humanity very carefully since your dramatic arrival. We have concerns but also hopes. I appreciate your honesty, Chen replied. What concerns you? Your military power is extraordinary. Your technology is advanced far beyond most species in the Council. Your coordination and discipline are unmatched. These things make you potentially very dangerous. And what gives you hope? Chen asked. Your restraint, Thel said simply. You could have destroyed the Krathon forces completely. You could have pursued them back to their homeworld and crushed their entire military. You could have made demands and issued ultimatums. Instead, you treated prisoners with dignity. You returned captured crews unharmed. You asked only for peace and cooperation. Chen nodded thoughtfully. My species learned some very hard lessons throughout our history. We learned that total victory often plants the seeds of future conflicts. We learned that humiliated enemies rarely become peaceful neighbors. We learned that sustainable peace requires not just winning wars, but winning the peace that follows. These are wise lessons, Thel observed. Not all species learn them. The Krathons certainly have not. The Krathons are warriors trapped in an old way of thinking, Chen said. They believe that strength means domination. They have not yet learned that true strength can also mean protection and restraint. Perhaps in time they will learn, or perhaps they will continue on their current path until they destroy themselves. Either way, humanity will be here to protect those who cannot protect themselves. And if the Krathons decide to wage total war against Earth? Thel asked quietly. Chen's expression became hard. Then they will discover exactly how far human military capability extends. We have shown them only a small fraction of what we can do. We hope they are smart enough not to force us to show them more. Thel was silent for a moment, processing this information. Admiral, my people would like to request access to your defensive technologies. We have had our own difficulties with aggressive neighbors. Your shield systems and detection arrays would be invaluable. Of course, Chen agreed immediately. That was part of our agreement with the Council. We will send a technical team to your homeworld within the month. We will provide full specifications and training for your engineers. You do this freely? With no strings attached? With only one string, Chen said with a slight smile. Use these technologies for defense, not aggression. Protect your people and your neighbors. Do not become what you feared. That is a condition we gladly accept, Thel said. Similar conversations were happening across the galaxy. Species that had lived in fear of stronger neighbors were reaching out to Earth. They wanted technology. They wanted training. They wanted to learn how humans had achieved such remarkable coordination and effectiveness. Earth responded to every request. Human technical teams spread across dozens of worlds. They shared knowledge freely and trained local defense forces. They asked for nothing in return except friendship and mutual cooperation. The Galactic Council watched all this happen with a mixture of... The outer regions of Council space were very different from the core systems. Out here, law enforcement was weak or non-existent. Pirates operated with little fear of consequences. Raiding parties from hostile species crossed borders regularly. Civilian freighters traveled in armed convoys and still disappeared with disturbing frequency. This was the frontier, where civilization's grip was loose and danger lurked around every asteroid field. It was exactly where the Phoenix Dawn and the Third Fleet needed to be. Captain Hayes studied the sector maps in her ready room. Lieutenant Commander Morrison sat across from her, reviewing intelligence reports from Council sources. In the past 6 months, 47 civilian vessels have gone missing in this sector, Morrison reported. Most were small freighters or passenger ships. A few were exploration vessels. The Council has investigation teams, but they never find anything useful. Because the pirates know the Council's procedures, Hayes said. They know how long it takes for Council forces to respond. They know the investigation protocols. They have had decades to learn how to avoid getting caught. So how do we approach this differently? Hayes smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. We do not follow their rules. We do not announce our presence. We do not patrol on predictable routes. We become ghosts. We watch, we wait, and when they make their move, we hit them so hard they never see it coming. Morrison nodded slowly. Unconventional tactics. The pirates are not going to know what hit them. That is the idea. Get me Colonel Peters. I want his Marines ready for rapid deployment. And talk to Lieutenant Carter about setting up sensor nets across the sector. If a ship so much as changes course unexpectedly, I want to know about it. Over the next 2 weeks, the Third Fleet established a presence in the outer regions. But it was not the kind of presence anyone expected. Instead of making grand announcements or patrolling main shipping lanes, the human ships scattered across the sector. They positioned themselves near asteroid fields, nebulae, and other areas where sensors had difficulty detecting ships. They watched. They listened. They gathered data on every ship movement, every communication, every transaction at every trading post. The humans were building a complete picture of how the criminal networks operated in this region. Captain Vren of the Kelmar people had been assigned to serve as a liaison with the human fleet. He had volunteered for the position immediately when it was offered. He felt he owed the humans his life and wanted to help however he could. I do not understand, Vren said to Hayes one day as they reviewed patrol patterns. Why are we not stopping these suspicious vessels? We have identified at least a dozen ships that are clearly operating outside legal parameters. Because we want the whole network. Not just a few small-time operators, Hayes explained patiently. If we arrest them now, the larger organization simply replaces them. We need to follow the chain all the way to the top. We need to find their bases, their leaders, their entire infrastructure. That could take months, Vren protested. It could, Hayes agreed. But when we finally act, we will eliminate the entire problem instead of just treating symptoms. Trust me, Captain. Patients now will save lives later. 3 weeks into their deployment, the trap finally closed. A small Kelmar freighter entered the sector carrying medical supplies to an outer colony. It broadcast the standard identification codes and followed approved shipping routes. It should have been completely safe. But Lieutenant Sarah Park, monitoring communications from the Signals Intelligence Station, detected something interesting. A coded transmission between 3 ships that were supposedly unrelated to each other. The encryption was sophisticated, but human code-breaking capabilities were more sophisticated. Captain, I think we have activity, Park reported. 3 vessels are coordinating an intercept on the Kelmar freighter. They will reach it in approximately 40 minutes. Hayes was on her feet instantly. Sound general quarters. All ships prepare for combat operations, but maintain radio silence. I do not want them to know we are here. The Phoenix Dawn and 2 escort destroyers began moving silently through space. Their engines were at minimum power. Their electronic signatures were reduced to almost nothing. To any casual observer, they looked like distant asteroids drifting through the void. The Kelmar freighter continued on its route, completely unaware of the danger approaching. Its small crew had no weapons and minimal shields. They were counting on Council protection that was light years away. The 3 pirate vessels closed in from different directions. They were coordinating their approach perfectly, clearly having done this many times before. When they were close enough, they powered up weapons and sent the standard demand. Kelmar vessel, cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resist and you will be destroyed. The freighter captain did the only thing he could do. He complied. The pirates moved alongside, preparing to transfer the cargo and likely take the crew hostage for ransom. It was a routine operation for them, rehearsed and refined over years of successful raids. Then Captain Hayes spoke one word over the fleet channel. Execute. The Phoenix Dawn and her escorts dropped their stealth measures and lit up their targeting systems. The 3 pirate vessels suddenly found themselves painted by multiple weapon locks, from ships that had materialized out of nowhere. Human destroyers could accelerate faster than almost anything in the galaxy. They closed the distance in seconds. Pirate vessels, this is Captain Lisa Hayes of the Earth Defense Force. You are surrounded and outgunned. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. This is your only warning. The pirate captain on the lead vessel made a fatal mistake. Instead of surrendering, he tried to run. His ship's engines flared to life as he attempted to escape. Lieutenant Ben Carter did not hesitate. His fingers flew over the weapons control panel. A single railgun shot, carefully aimed and perfectly calculated, struck the pirate ship's engine section. The kinetic impact disabled the engines completely, without breaching the hull or killing the crew. The other 2 pirate vessels immediately surrendered. They had heard stories about the humans. They had no desire to test whether those stories were true. Colonel Jack Peters led the boarding teams personally. His Marines moved through the pirate vessels with practiced efficiency. They secured the crews, confiscated weapons, and began downloading data from the ship's computers. Within an hour, they had custody of 47 pirates and a treasure trove of intelligence. The Kelmar freighter captain contacted the Phoenix Dawn with obvious relief and gratitude. Thank you, Captain Hayes. We transmitted a distress call, but we did not expect anyone to respond so quickly. We were in the area, Hayes replied with deliberate understatement. Are you and your crew unharmed? Yes, completely. Thanks to you and your people. Good. We will escort you to your destination, and you can tell other freighter captains that the outer regions are under new management. The intelligence gathered from the pirate ships was invaluable. It included communication logs, navigation data, and financial records. Most importantly, it included the locations of 3 pirate bases hidden in asteroid fields throughout the sector. Hayes called a conference with her senior officers. They gathered around the tactical display in the briefing room, studying the newly acquired information. 3 bases, Morrison said, highlighting them on the map. Each one supports between 5 and 12 ships. Total pirate force in this sector is approximately 25 vessels. How are they organized? Hayes asked. Loosely affiliated rather than a unified command structure, Morrison explained. They share intelligence and sometimes coordinate on larger targets, but each base operates independently. Colonel Peters leaned forward, studying the display. If we hit them all simultaneously, We can eliminate the entire network before they have a chance to scatter or warn each other. Agreed, Hayes said. But we will need help. Morrison, contact the 1st and 2nd fleets. See if Admiral Chen can spare us some additional ships for a coordinated strike. Already done, Captain, Morrison said with a slight smile. Admiral Chen anticipated your request. She is sending 6 destroyers and 3 marine assault ships. They will arrive in 48 hours. Hayes nodded with satisfaction. Excellent. We will use that time to finalize our attack plans. I want detailed reconnaissance on each base. Approach vectors, defensive capabilities, escape routes, everything. The next 2 days were filled with intense preparation. Human ships moved carefully through the asteroid fields, using passive sensors to map the pirate bases without alerting them to the surveillance. Pilots studied the terrain. Marines reviewed assault procedures. Engineers prepared boarding equipment. Captain Vren participated in the planning sessions and was amazed by the level of detail humans considered. They planned for dozens of contingencies. They calculated precise timing windows. They assigned specific responsibilities to each ship and each squad of Marines. You approach warfare like it is a science, Vren observed during one planning session. It is a science, Colonel Peters replied. A terrible science, but a science nonetheless. The more carefully we plan, the fewer people die. Ours and theirs. You plan to minimize casualties even among the pirates? Vren asked with surprise. Of course, Peters said. Many of them are probably just desperate people who turn to piracy because they